Hey guys, what's up? Serena here from thriftiving.com. We are doing another crafting for charity event. If you remember, in the spring we did an amazing makeover on one of these boring plastic playhouses. This is from Little Tykes, and Homes.com is sponsoring a crafting for charity event. That's right, we won. We donated $750 to a local homeless shelter. And so now it's me and two other bloggers again, and we are going to battle it out to see who's got the best holiday decorated tiny home.
So would you be surprised to know that when I started this project, I had no idea which direction I was going in. I grabbed a bunch of colors and just started spray painting, and it just wasn't speaking to me. The white did nothing for me. I was not excited about it. And then I moved on to the shutters and made those green. Again, I was like, oh, this is not what's making me excited. And then I thought, what's that one symbol of the holidays of winter? Red and black fabric. So let's take some of this and cut out a pattern and glue it to the front of this playhouse. That is what we're going to do. And that was the decision that got me excited to get started with this project. So I went ahead and put some pieces of paper on here and just used my hands and tried to crease the papers along the area where I knew the fabric would be glued to. And you'll notice here I'm leaving a little bit of extra paper. That's for the seam allowance. I didn't want to make this too short. I only had about 1.5 yards of fabric. That was all they had at the craft store. So I needed to be very exact with my pattern, making sure that I creased it in the right areas, left enough in case there was, some adjustments I had to make to the fabric, to the pattern, and then just got to cutting. And once that pattern was cut out, I put it aside and got started with the spray painting. Now, I knew that I wanted the bricks to be white, so I got started with that. I will tell you that if you are doing a project like this, definitely spray paint this playhouse either taken apart so that each part is laying flat. You will have less runs, or you can just flip this on its side and spray paint each section while it's lying flat. You'll get less runs that way. And also here, you'll see that I'm not using tape. I am just kind of putting a piece of paper up there just to help prevent some of the overspray, but you definitely want to use tape. And sometimes when you're spraying, you will get overspray inside the playhouse. So you can always put some plastic or paper behind the windows. Another thing, I'm not using a primer. Now, in the last project that I did, I had really good results. The paint did not chip later on after it was done and totally cured, but you can also rough up the plastic and use a primer. I also knew that red would be a more vibrant color and it would go with the dark gray in the windows. So while I let that dry, it was time to cut out this beautiful fabric. So I laid the pattern on top of it, making sure that I was at least trying to be straight with the lines. Whenever you're using fabric that has a pattern like this, you generally want to try to match all of your pattern repeats. Now, because I only had 1.5 yards of fabric, that wasn't possible. So I just tried to use whatever fabric I could, but I did try to keep it straight. And this was the moment of angst when I dry fitted on there. Did it work? Did I cut out this pattern properly? And it looks like it's going to be a good fit. So I set that aside, pulled out the black spray paint, did the mailbox, and I also did use a little bit of primer on the doors. I probably am going to give this to my niece. She's only 7 months old right now, but eventually she will use it, and I'll have to make sure that the paint does not chip off on the door. So I did a coat of primer, gray primer, because you always want to use a dark primer when you're using a dark color, and let that dry. And then it was time to get started on adhering this. This was also another moment of angst. So I fitted on there as best as I could, and I did trim away the excess. Remember, we put probably an additional 1/2 inch along the edges so that I could trim this exactly to the size I needed. So you'll see that I'm using a spray adhesive and I'm not pulling the whole thing off. I'm actually just peeling back one little section, spraying that, and then folding it back into place. Now, this is where I kind of messed up a little because I got some of that spray adhesive on the fabric, and that was pretty difficult to remove. I had to kind of scrape it with a washcloth, but I folded the edges over so that you're not going to see those when it's all together, and then just trimmed away the rest of the fabric so that this could be an exact fit. Now, you can tape off so that you don't get the sticky part on the doorway, but just be mindful, if the paint is still wet, it may come off. So I just went ahead and sprayed and tried not to get the overspray anywhere else. Now, here's a few quick tips for doing a project like this or another project where you're using fabric and spray adhesive. If you have a pattern on your fabric, definitely use that to your advantage to get nice, crisp, clean cuts. And be sure that your fabric is going to be straight. Patterns, it's definitely more noticeable if your patterns are crooked. And also, if you're using spray adhesive, look at the instructions, because if you want a permanent bond, you typically have to get it on there within a certain amount of time. In this case, it was 15 seconds. But if you're going for a temporary bond, you could easily do something like this on your bedroom wall, on some part of your house if you're a renter, and be able to easily remove that when it comes time to move. But that would be more of a temporary bond. So you'd have to look at the instructions. Now you see that I'm using something here on the ends called fray check. This is so that your ends don't unravel. It's not something you want to happen when you're doing any kind of like upholstery project or a sewing project. So definitely use something to make sure that your ends don't unravel on you, and just keep it nice, straight, and smooth. When you're using spray adhesive, you can use a piece of paper to block some of the overspray, but you'll also want to make sure that you're doing this either outside or in a well-ventilated area. Spray adhesive smells, and the smell will just linger in your house, so definitely make sure you've got a lot of ventilation. All right, so once I had this fabric on here, I wanted to do some trim. The edges looked okay, but I just wanted to cover it up and help set off some of that black in the fabric. So I just used some bias tape. This was from some old sewing projects. Use a little bit of glue and just glued it in place. And you know, you can't have a holiday house without lights, right? So I had a strand of lights, thankfully, with just some tape. I was able to get them up there and they stayed pretty well. And this is what we started with, a blank canvas plastic thing that just came out of a box, and with some fabric, some paint, and just a little bit of creativity, we turned this into an amazing playhouse. But here's the thing, you can actually use this for your pets too. In the last video, a lot of you commented that you would love to use this as a doghouse. Yes. If you find one at the thrift store, if you buy it from Little Tykes, this is a canvas for you to just create something amazing that you wouldn't be embarrassed of putting in your family room or your playroom. So if you enjoyed this project, please do vote for me. The voting dates are down below with a link to homes.com, which is where you can do home searches, get home buying advice, look for rental properties, anything. If you enjoyed this, please vote for me, because there's a homeless shelter here in Maryland that would love your donation if we win. All right, guys, I'll see you next video. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next project.